And our next speaker is currently a professor at the Australian National University, Professor John Hewson, AM, economist, company director, former leader of the Liberal Party. He's also worked for the International Monetary Fund, the Reserve Bank of Australia, Macquarie Bank, and the University of New South Wales. He is committed to corporate, social and environmental responsibility and has been speaking for several years about climate change and renewable energy. Please welcome John Hewson.
Well, thank you very much, Julie. Let me begin by acknowledging the fact that we are meeting on the land of the Gadigal people and pay my respects to their elders past and present. And might I pass a personal comment that it's about time we gave our Indigenous heritage full recognition in our Constitution. I live for that day. I feel I probably ought to offer an apology on behalf of Mike Pence. Given the stance of the Trump administration on science and climate science in particular, I'm sure he would want me to pass on his apologies, and perhaps for not being here as well. I'm here today because I'm very concerned. I'm concerned that at a time where science should be more relevant and useful to the development of our society and our economy than it's ever been, perhaps, we see a widening gap between our political leadership, between the public and between science. And it's an issue of, I think, fundamental significance to the development of this country, and anything we can do to raise the profile and significance of science, the better. Scientists are not given the status they deserve. Science and science conclusions and research are not recognised the way they should be. They're not properly funded. They're not reflected adequately in our school and our university education systems. And of course, we see political games played endlessly with the issue of science. I'm of course a social scientist, an economist, and I've spent my life since I got involved in public policy in the middle 70s as an advisor to Sir Philip Lynch, the Treasurer. I went into that job not because I liked Phil or not because I wanted to be interested in politics, but I believed in evidence-based policy, and that evidence-based policy would actually be good politics with a relatively short lag. Unfortunately, today, it's politics, short-term politics, which is the main impediment to a lot of the scientific debate and discussion that we should be having in this country, and to a lot of the development and implementation of good public policy and good government. Our politics today has become incredibly short-term, incredibly opportunistic, incredibly populist, mostly negative, sometimes very personal, and not at all interested in the substance of issues. So we have fake news, and we have post-truth politics today, which should be a global embarrassment to anyone who's genuinely interested in the development of good government and good policy. And it seems to me I think the area that impacts on me most, has done over the last several decades, is the whole climate science debate. You know, as a non-climate scientist, how would I know we have a problem? The only reason I know we've got a problem is that we have the evidence produced by climate scientists. And unusually for climate scientists, they predominantly agree on something. Right? It is the nature of science to disagree, right? To contest each other's hypotheses, to contest each other's theories and research conclusions. But here we have something like 97% of peer-assessed climate scientists saying this is a big issue, a significant issue, an urgent issue. And it gets ignored in the public debate and particularly in the political debate. And not just the climate scientists, there's a host of other scientists and broader sections of the Australian civil society that have come in behind that view. Yet you wouldn't know that when you look at the way their political system has dealt with the issue of climate science over the last several decades. I remember a speech made by our previous Prime Minister, John Howard, at the end of 2013 to a climate deniers group in London, one organised by Nigel Lawson, a noted climate denier. I've actually debated on the issue, but John took the opportunity to say, look, openly two things. He said, one, he admitted to having played short-term politics with the issue of climate for the entire time he'd been involved in politics. When it suited him to support, say, an emissions trading scheme, he supported it. And when it didn't suit him politically, he didn't support it, he opposed it. And then he made the most incredible statement. He said, I've ended up an agnostic when it comes to climate science. I prefer to rely on my instincts. Right, I worked for the guy for 8 years. He spent a few years working for me. I wouldn't trust his instincts, let me tell you. But it's not a question. It's not a question of religion. It's a question of science and scientific fact and scientific evidence. And for that to be lost in the current debate is an embarrassment beyond belief. And as a businessman, to know that this country has the technological solutions to climate. We have an abundance of sunshine, we have an abundance of wind, and we have the technologies that will allow us to capitalise on that abundance, that significant national asset. We should be leading the world in the development of renewable energy research. Back in 1993, when I lost the supposedly unlosable election, apparently because of a birthday cake, I'm not sure about that, I had an environment policy that nobody paid any attention to. But it called for a 20% cut in emissions by the year 2000 off a 1990 base. I'm still waiting to hear about how we get the 5% by 2020 off a 2000 base, or how we're going to get 26 to 28% reduction in emissions by 2030. There is no transition strategy. Every day I wake up, I hear a different sort of initiative in the name of science and jobs and growth and so on. One day it's going to be hydro, the next day it's going to be coal, the next day it might be renewables. There is no substantive response to the most significant moral, economic and social challenge of this century in our political process. Let me finish by unfortunately reminding you of the letters GST, which probably have cost me more than I care to remember. But can I challenge you to get science tough, please?